The sun was just beginning to rise when I unlocked the front door, a box of freshly baked croissants in one hand and a printed itinerary in the other. My heart raced with excitement as I tiptoed through the house, careful not to wake Emily. This wasn't just a vacation, it was a second chance. Things between us had been tense lately, too many late nights at work, arguments over little things, and an emotional distance I couldn't quite bridge. This trip, a luxurious getaway to a private island resort, was my way of hitting the reset button. I set the croissants on the counter and walked into the bedroom, where Emily was still sound asleep. Her brown hair fanned out across the pillow, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I hadn't been as present as I should have been. Maybe I'd let work take priority. But this trip would fix everything. It had to. Rise and shine, I said gently, holding up the itinerary. Emily stirred, blinking at me groggily. What's this? Our ticket to paradise, I said, grinning. Her eyes widened as she sat up, scanning the details. A private island? Adam, are you serious? Dead serious, I said. Pack your bags. Our flight leaves tonight. The rest of the day was a blur of packing and anticipation. Emily seemed genuinely excited, her mood lighter than it had been in weeks. As we boarded the plane, she leaned against my shoulder, murmuring, "This is perfect. Thank you." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd done something right. When we arrived at the resort, it was everything I'd hoped for: crystal clear water, luxurious villas, and a level of privacy that felt like a dream. Emily's face lit up as we were escorted to our bungalow, her enthusiasm infectious. "This is incredible," she said, spinning around to take it all in. "Only the best for you," I replied, smiling. But even as I unpacked our bags and planned our first day of relaxation, there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Emily had been distant lately, not just emotionally, but physically. The late nights, the hushed phone calls, was it really just work stress, as she claimed? I pushed the thought aside. This wasn't the time for doubt. "Let's hit the beach," I said, grabbing a towel. "Actually," Emily said hesitantly, "I was thinking of checking out the spa first. They have this amazing massage package." "Go for it," I said, trying to sound encouraging. "I'll see you later." As she left, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Something about the way she'd hesitated, the way her eyes darted to her phone before she walked out the door, it didn't sit right with me. But I told myself I was being paranoid. This was our vacation, our chance to reconnect. I couldn't ruin it by overthinking. Or so I thought. That evening, after a long swim and a few drinks at the bar, I headed back to our bungalow. Emily still wasn't there, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, hesitating for a moment before unlocking it. The first thing I saw was a text message from an unknown number. "Unknown. Can't wait to see you tonight. Meet me by the pool at 11. My heart sank. I stared at the message, disbelief and anger coursing through me. Who was this? And why was Emily meeting them at the pool? I paced the room, my mind racing. Confronting her now would lead to a fight, and fights on vacations rarely ended well. But ignoring it wasn't an option either. I glanced at the clock. It was 10:45 p.m. I had 15 minutes to figure out what to do. The seconds ticked by slowly, my thoughts racing as I stared at Emily's phone. The words from the unknown number burned into my mind. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Meet me by the pool at 11. I felt like I was suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest. And for a moment, I considered calling her right then, confronting her on the spot, demanding an explanation. But the thought of causing a scene in paradise, of making a scene on the very vacation I'd planned to save our marriage, made me freeze. Instead, I slid her phone back onto the nightstand, and a sense of clarity hit me. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. But I wasn't going to let her get away with this either. I grabbed my wallet and walked out of the bungalow, my steps deliberate as I made my way to the resort's front desk. I needed to do something, and I needed to do it now. The desk clerk smiled politely as I approached. "How can I help you, sir?" "I'd like to check out early," I said calmly, my voice betraying nothing. "And I need to cancel all my wife's return tickets." Her eyes flicked to the computer, typing away. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'll need to confirm a few details before I can proceed." I handed her my credit card. "I don't care about the details. Just cancel everything. I'll settle the bill." The clerk hesitated for a moment, but ultimately complied, and within minutes, everything was arranged. I paid the exorbitant bill, signed the cancellation form, and asked her to hold on to Emily's tickets for me. "Thank you," I said, turning to leave. The weight of what I'd just done settled on me as I walked back to the bungalow. I just sealed her fate, and I knew she wouldn't be happy when she found out. When I returned to our room, Emily still wasn't back. It was nearly 11 p.m. now, and I knew she was likely heading to meet whoever was on the other end of those messages. I grabbed a fresh set of clothes from the closet, trying to focus on the mission at hand. I wasn't angry anymore. I was determined. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of the door unlocking, and Emily stepped inside, her face glowing, though there was something different in her eyes. Nervousness? Guilt? "Hey," she said, stepping in, the scent of the resort's floral perfume wafting through the air. "You're still up?" I didn't smile, didn't offer her the warmth I usually would. Instead, I said flatly, "Where were you?" She froze, her eyes darting around as if looking for a way out. I was at the spa. I told you earlier." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it looks like you've been meeting someone else." Emily's expression faltered for just a moment, and I knew she was trying to figure out how much I knew. I didn't give her the chance to lie. "I found the text message. The one from your friend." She took a shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly. "Adam, please. It's not what you think. I didn't mean to hurt you." I held up my hand, cutting her off. "Don't," I said, my voice cold. "Don't try to explain. You made your choices. And now, I'm making mine." Her face went pale as I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cancellation receipt. "Your return tickets?" I said, tossing it onto the bed. "I've canceled them. You're not going back with me. Not after everything you've done." Emily's eyes widened in shock and panic. "What? Adam, you can't do this. Please, you're just angry." "I'll fix this. I'll explain." I was confused, and I don't care about your explanations. I cut in, my anger rising. "You betrayed me. You betrayed everything we built. And now, you're going to figure out how to get back on your own." I walked toward the door, feeling the weight of the situation press against me. "You wanted to go to the pool at 11? I said, my voice thick with frustration. "Good luck. I'm sure Brad's waiting for you there." For the first time in months, I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before: fear. Real fear. "Adam, please. Don't leave me here. I'll fix it, I swear. I love you." I didn't respond. I grabbed my bag and walked out the door, leaving her standing there, crying in the middle of our luxurious resort room. As I walked through the resort, I felt a rush of mixed emotions. Part of me wanted to turn back, to say it was all a mistake, to forget everything and forgive her. But that part was small now, buried beneath a deep, searing sense of betrayal. She didn't deserve my forgiveness. I checked out early, maxed out the joint account, and took my leave. My mind raced as I left behind the luxury I'd hoped would save our marriage, leaving her stranded in paradise. She made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. The flight back was eerily quiet, despite the chatter and noise of passengers around me. My seat was by the window, overlooking the endless ocean below, but I barely noticed. My mind was spinning, replaying Emily's betrayal and her panicked pleas as I walked out. I clenched the armrest, my knuckles white. What was supposed to be a romantic getaway had turned into the ultimate humiliation. And yet, part of me felt satisfied. When the plane landed, the first thing I did was close the joint account. My hands shook slightly as I finalized the transaction, transferring the remaining funds into a private account in my name. Emily would find nothing but an empty balance when she tried to access it. The drive back to our house felt surreal. Everything looked the same streets, the same neighbors walking their dogs, the same front door, but it didn't feel like home anymore. I stood in the entryway, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Emily's things were everywhere, her jacket draped over a chair, her favorite mug on the kitchen counter. It felt like an invasion, like her presence was taunting me. Without thinking, I grabbed her mug and hurled it into the sink. The sound of ceramic shattering was loud, almost cathartic. I took a deep breath, running my hands through my hair. This wasn't me. I wasn't the kind of person who destroyed things in anger. But then again, I wasn't the kind of person who got cheated on either. As I sat down on the couch, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Emily, Adam, please. Call me. Let's talk. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to respond, to demand answers, to unleash all the anger and betrayal I was feeling. But another part of me, the stronger part, refused to give her the satisfaction. I deleted the message. For the next few days, I focused on taking control of my life again. I boxed up Emily's things, filling the living room with reminders of the life we'd built together, and the lies she'd hidden beneath it. Each item felt like a small victory. Her yoga mat, her collection of fitness magazines, the dumbbells I'd bought her. All of it went into the pile. Meanwhile, Emily's attempts to contact me became more desperate. Emily, Adam, I'm stranded here. I don't have money for a flight home. Please, just call me. Emily, I'm sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. Please don't leave me here. Emily, Adam, I love you. Don't do this. I need you. I didn't respond to any of them. On the third day she called, I stared at the screen, her name flashing in bold letters. Against my better judgment, I answered. Adam, she said immediately, her voice filled with relief. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. What do you want, Emily? I asked, my tone cold. I need to come home, she said, her voice cracking. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Please, just let me explain. I let out a bitter laugh. Explain what? How you lied to me. How you cheated. How you used our vacation as a rendezvous with your lover. Go ahead, Emily. I'm all ears. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, her breath hitching. I wasn't thinking. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to stop. Please, Adam. Don't leave me here. You made your choice, Emily, I said, my voice firm. Now you get to live with the consequences. She sobbed into the phone, but I felt no sympathy. I don't have any money, she cried. I don't even have a way to get back. Not my problem, I said. Figure it out. Before she could say anything else, I hung up. That night, I sat in the living room, surrounded by the boxes of her things. For the first time, I felt the weight of the situation fully settle on me. I wasn't just angry, I was heartbroken. This wasn't the life I'd imagined for us. The trust we'd built, the future we'd planned, it was all gone, shattered by her betrayal. But as I sat there, I realized something else. I wasn't just a victim in this. I had the power to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The days without Emily felt strange, like I was floating between anger and emptiness. The house was quieter than ever, the silence amplifying my thoughts. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows, felt like a reminder of what had happened. Her absence was everywhere. I tried to stay busy, throwing myself into work and errands, but every moment alone brought back flashes of our vacation. Her betrayal, the way she looked at me when I walked out the door. The texts hadn't stopped. Emily, Adam, I found a way to get back. Please, can we just talk when I'm home? Emily, I know you're angry, but I swear I'll make this right. Don't shut me out. I ignored every message. She deserved to feel what it was like to be left in the dark, to wonder if she'd burned every bridge. By the end of the week, the texts changed tone. They weren't pleading anymore. Emily, I know you're reading these. You can't just leave me stranded and ghost me forever. Emily, do you think you're the victim here? We both made mistakes. The last one hit harder than I wanted to admit. I stared at my phone, my mind spinning. Did she really think this was my fault? That I'd somehow pushed her into the arms of someone else? I wanted to scream at her, to let her know exactly how much she'd destroyed. But instead, I set my phone down and went to the garage. There, stacked neatly in boxes, were all her things. Her clothes, her books, her fitness gear, all reminders of the life we'd shared. I loaded them into my car. The drive to her friend's house was uneventful, but the weight of what I was doing pressed down on me. Emily had always considered Megan her closest friend, and I knew she'd reach out to her eventually. When Megan opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. Adam, what are you doing here? Dropping these off, I said, gesturing to the boxes. Her expression shifted, a mix of curiosity and hesitation. Is everything okay? No, I said bluntly. But it will be. Megan didn't ask any more questions, and I didn't offer any explanations. I left the boxes on her porch and drove away, feeling a strange sense of relief. Emily's things were out of my house, out of my life. But as I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail from Emily. "Adam, I'm back. I'm at Megan's place. Please, just come see me. Let's talk." Her voice cracked at the end, and for a moment, I felt a pang of something. Pity? Regret? But I shook it off. Later that night, as I sat in the living room, I couldn't stop replaying the voicemail in my head. What would I even say to her? How could I face her after everything that had happened? The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. But so was the hurt. I poured myself a drink, staring at the empty boxes where her things used to be. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. Days passed, and I kept busy trying to rebuild some sense of normalcy. But Emily's messages kept coming, chipping away at the walls I'd built around myself. Her latest one was different. "Emily, I know I don't deserve it, but I need to see you. Just once. Please, Adam." It wasn't a demand or an accusation this time. It was a plea. And as much as I hated to admit it, part of me wanted closure too. I called Megan to arrange the meeting. "I'll come to your place," I said. "But this isn't a reconciliation. I just want to hear her out." Megan hesitated. "Are you sure, Adam? You don't have to do this." "I do," I said firmly. "I need answers." When I arrived at Megan's house, my stomach was in knots. I parked on the street and sat in the car for a moment, steeling myself. When I finally walked to the door, Megan answered quickly. "She's in the living room," she said softly. I stepped inside, and there she was, Emily, sitting on the edge of the couch, her face pale and drawn. She looked up at me, her eyes filling with tears. "Adam," she said, standing. I stayed near the doorway, keeping my distance. "You wanted to talk," I said coldly. "So talk." Emily swallowed hard, her hands twisting nervously. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. "Try the truth," I said. "For once." She flinched at my words but nodded. "I made a mistake," she said. "A terrible mistake. I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you until it was too late." I crossed my arms, my expression unmoved. "Why, Emily? Why did you do it?" She hesitated, tears spilling over. "I don't know," she said. "I felt lost, like I wasn't enough. Brad made me feel wanted, and I got caught up in it. But it didn't mean anything, Adam. I swear." I laughed bitterly. "It didn't mean anything? You risked our marriage for something that didn't mean anything? Do you hear yourself?" "I was stupid," she said, her voice breaking. "I know that, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But Adam, I still love you. I never stopped loving you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. "You have a funny way of showing it," I said. "Do you even understand what you've done? You destroyed everything we built, everything I thought we had." "I know," she whispered, "and I'm so sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." I shook my head. "You can't make this right, Emily. Some things can't be undone." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with everything we weren't saying. Finally, I stood. "I came here for answers, and I got them. You were selfish, and you didn't think about the consequences. That's all I needed to know." "Adam, please," she said, standing as well. "Don't walk away. Let me prove to you that I can change." I paused at the doorway, turning back to face her. "You already proved something to me, Emily," I said. "You proved that I can't trust you." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the text message, the lies, the way she betrayed me in paradise. I walked out, leaving her standing there in tears. Leaving Megan's house felt like ripping off a bandage. The confrontation with Emily had been raw, painful, but also necessary. As I drove away, the tears in her eyes stayed with me, a heavy reminder of the love we'd once shared and how far we'd fallen. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove aimlessly, trying to process everything. Her excuses, her pleas, the way she'd said she still loved me. It all played on a loop in my mind. By the time I got home, the sun had set, casting long shadows across the living room. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty boxes where her belongings had once been. The silence felt oppressive, but I couldn't bring myself to fill it. I opened a bottle of whiskey, pouring a generous glass. As the burn slid down my throat, I wondered if I'd made the right decision by walking away. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Megan. Megan, are you okay? She's a mess right now. I don't think she expected you to be so firm. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Me? I'm fine. Just needed to say my piece. Megan replied quickly. Megan, if you ever need to talk, you know where to find me. I set the phone down, letting her words linger. Megan had always been supportive, but I couldn't help wondering if her loyalty to Emily had wavered after everything. The next morning, I woke to find another text from Emily. Emily, Adam, I know you hate me, but please let me explain more. I can't lose you. I sighed, tossing the phone aside. Her words felt hollow now, like echoes of a life I didn't recognize anymore. I spent the day cleaning the house, trying to distract myself. Every corner held a memory of her, from the throw pillows she'd picked out to the art prints she'd insisted on hanging in the hallway. By evening, I'd had enough. I grabbed my phone and called the investigator I'd hired during our vacation. I need closure, I said. I need to know everything about Brad. The investigator didn't hesitate. I've been digging deeper since you contacted me, and I think you'll want to see this. We met at a small diner on the edge of town. The investigator slid a manila folder across the table, his expression serious. Brad isn't just a trainer, he began. He has a history of getting involved with married women. Emily wasn't the first, and she probably won't be the last. My stomach turned as I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. There were photos of Brad with other women, emails, even court records from a previous incident where he'd been sued for harassment. Why hasn't this come out before? I asked, anger rising in my chest. Most of the women he's targeted are too embarrassed to come forward, the investigator explained. They don't want to air their personal lives in public, and he's good at covering his tracks. But not good enough, I said, my voice cold. As I drove home, the pieces started falling into place. Brad wasn't just some fling. He was a predator, someone who thrived on manipulation and control. And Emily had fallen right into his trap. For the first time, my anger shifted. It wasn't just directed at Emily anymore. It was directed at Brad. That night, I sat down with a notepad, sketching out my next move. If Brad thought he could walk away unscathed, he was wrong. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. The folder sat on my kitchen table, its contents spread out like pieces of a sinister puzzle. Brad wasn't just some guy who'd ruined my marriage. He was a serial manipulator, a predator who left destruction in his wake. For the first time in weeks, my anger felt focused. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about justice. I called the investigator the next morning. I want to confront him, I said, my voice steady. The investigator hesitated. Adam, that's a risky move. Guys like Brad thrive on confrontation. He might turn this around on you. I don't care, I replied. He needs to know he can't keep getting away with this. By midday, I had a plan. The investigator would arrange a meeting with Brad under the guise of a potential client interested in private training sessions. I'd be there, posing as a friend of the client, ready to expose him. It wasn't subtle, but subtlety wasn't what I was aiming for. The meeting was set for the following evening at a high-end cafe downtown. I arrived early, taking a seat near the back where I could observe without being noticed. When Brad walked in, my hands clenched into fists. He was dressed sharply, his confidence radiating with every step. This was a man who believed he was untouchable. The investigator greeted him warmly, leading him to the table where I sat. This is my friend Adam, the investigator said casually. He's interested in your services too. Brad glanced at me, his smile polite but wary. Nice to meet you. Likewise, I said, keeping my tone neutral. As the conversation shifted to Brad's training programs, I leaned back, watching him carefully. He spoke with ease, selling his services with the charm of a practiced salesman. You seem to have a lot of experience, I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. Is that how you keep your clients satisfied? Brad's smile faltered for a split second before he recovered. I'm good at what I do, he said smoothly. My clients appreciate that. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. I bet Emily appreciated it too. The color drained from his face. Excuse me? You heard me, I said, my voice cold. You thought you could ruin my marriage and walk away unscathed? Think again. Brad glanced at the investigator, who sat back, letting me take the lead. I don't know what you're talking about, Brad said, his confidence wavering. Oh, I think you do, I replied, pulling out a photo from the folder. It showed Brad with another married woman, his arm around her in a way that left no doubt about their relationship. "This isn't your first time, is it?" I continued. "You prey on vulnerable women, manipulate them, and then move on to the next." Brad's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," I shot back. "Enough to make sure you never do this to anyone else." The tension at the table was thick as Brad tried to maintain his composure. "This is harassment," he said finally, his voice low. "You have no proof of anything." I pulled out another photo, this one of him and Emily at the resort. "I think this is all the proof I need." Brad's eyes darted around the cafe, his confidence crumbling under the weight of the evidence. "You've got two options," I said, my voice firm. "You can admit what you've done and back off, or I can take all of this to the authorities and your clients." For a moment, he said nothing, his hands clenching the edge of the table. Finally, he stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This isn't over," he said, his voice filled with venom. "Oh, it is," I replied. "You just don't know it yet." As Brad stormed out of the cafe, I felt a surge of satisfaction. He wasn't untouchable, and now he knew it. The investigator leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "You handled that well." "It's not over yet," I said, my resolve strengthening. "I'm just getting started." Brad's exit from the cafe was abrupt, but the energy he left behind was anything but passive. As I sat there, the investigator's words echoed in my head. "Guys like him don't back down easily." That thought stayed with me on the drive home. It wasn't just about the confrontation anymore. It was about what Brad might do next. The first sign of his retaliation came the next morning. I woke to find a message from an unknown number on my phone. "Unknown. Watch your back. You don't know who you're messing with." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. Brad's arrogance was predictable, but the threat still rattled me. I forwarded the message to the investigator. A few hours later, he called. "It's definitely Brad," he confirmed. "He's trying to intimidate you. Don't engage." "I'm not afraid of him," I said, though the knot in my stomach betrayed my confidence. "I know," the investigator replied. "But Brad's desperate now. Desperate people do stupid things." As the day went on, the tension in my chest grew heavier. I kept expecting something else, a call, a message, even a visit, but nothing came. By evening, I decided to clear my head. I went for a long walk, the cool air helping to dull the edges of my frustration. But as I returned home, I noticed something odd. A car I didn't recognize was parked down the street, its engine idling. I slowed my steps, watching it carefully. The windows were tinted, and I couldn't see who was inside. After a moment, the car pulled away, disappearing around the corner. Was it paranoia? Or was Brad escalating? The investigator assured me that I wasn't overreacting. "I'll look into it," he said. "In the meantime, stay alert. If Brad's willing to make veiled threats, he might be willing to do more." The idea of Brad lurking in the shadows, plotting his next move, made my skin crawl. But it also fueled my determination. If he wanted to fight, I wasn't backing down. That night, I decided to dig deeper into Brad's history. The investigator had given me plenty to work with, but I wanted to see if there were any other patterns, anything that could give me an edge. It didn't take long to find another connection. A woman named Rachel had posted on a local forum about a similar experience. A charming trainer who had ruined her marriage and then vanished. I reached out to her, my message cautious but direct. Rachel, I came across your post about Brad. I think we've had similar experiences. Would you be open to talking?" She responded within an hour. "Rachel, you mean he's still at it? I thought I was the last one. I'd be happy to share what I know." We arranged a call for the next day. Rachel's voice was calm, but tinged with bitterness as she recounted her story. "Brad has a way of making you feel special," she said. "He knows exactly what to say, how to act. But once he's done with you, he moves on, leaving chaos behind." Her story mirrored mine in unsettling ways. The manipulation, the lies, the calculated charm. It was all part of Brad's pattern. By the time the call ended, I had a clearer picture of who Brad really was. He wasn't just a cheater or a manipulator. He was a serial abuser, someone who thrived on power and control. And now, he'd met his match. That evening, as I reviewed my notes and planned my next steps, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Brad. "Brad, you don't want to play this game, Adam. Walk away while you still can." I stared at the message, my resolve hardening. Me. See you soon. The tension between Brad and me was nearing its breaking point. His threats weren't subtle, and his attempts to intimidate me only fueled my determination. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about ensuring Brad couldn't continue his cycle of destruction. The next morning, the investigator called with an idea. If we can catch him in the act of intimidating you, we can add it to the growing pile of evidence, he said. But we'll need to lure him out. I hesitated, weighing the risks. What are you suggesting? A meeting, he replied. Somewhere public, but controlled. We'll record everything, and if he slips up, we'll have him cornered. I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Let's do it. The investigator set the meeting for the following evening at a quiet park near the city center. I wasn't thrilled about the location, but he assured me it was safe with discreet cameras placed in strategic spots. When the time came, I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest. The park was nearly empty, the dim glow of streetlights casting long shadows across the pathways. Brad showed up 10 minutes later, his confidence radiating as he strolled toward me. Adam, he said, his voice dripping with mock friendliness. You wanted to talk? I forced a calm expression, even as my anger simmered beneath the surface. I thought it was time we cleared the air. Brad smirked, crossing his arms. You mean you're ready to admit you're out of your depth? I didn't rise to the bait. I mean, it's time for you to stop playing games. I know what you've been doing, not just with Emily, but with others. Rachel, for one. His smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. Rachel? Really? You're digging up old stories now? Stories with evidence, I said, my voice steady. Brad's eyes narrowed, his composure slipping. You think you're clever, don't you? Digging through my past, gathering your little files. But let me tell you something, Adam. You don't scare me. I'm not trying to scare you, I replied. I'm trying to stop you. Brad took a step closer, his voice dropping. You have no idea who you're dealing with. You think you're the first husband to come after me? You won't win. His arrogance made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. Maybe not, I said. But I've already done more than you realize. Brad frowned, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. Instead, I gestured subtly toward the nearby bench, where the investigator sat with a small recording device hidden in his bag. Brad followed my gaze, his expression shifting to one of realization. You're recording this? He hissed, his bravado cracking. I smiled faintly. Smile for the camera, Brad. You just made my case stronger. His fists clenched, and for a moment I thought he might lash out. But instead he stepped back, his anger barely contained. This isn't over, he said through gritted teeth. Oh, it is, I replied. Because the next time we meet, it'll be in court. Brad stormed off, his confidence shattered. The investigator approached me moments later, holding up the recording device. We got everything, he said. This, combined with the evidence we already have, should be enough to start legal proceedings. I nodded, a sense of relief washing over me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was finally gaining the upper hand. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the weight of the confrontation settling on me. Brad's threats were still fresh in my mind, but so was the look of fear in his eyes when he realized he'd been caught. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of the end. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. After the meeting with Emily, I threw myself completely into the case against Brad. Harper and the investigator worked tirelessly to piece together a bulletproof narrative, and every new discovery strengthened our position. But the real turning point came when we decided to take the story public. Harper suggested reaching out to a local journalist who specialized in investigative reporting. With the evidence you've gathered, this could be a powerful expose, he said. At first, I hesitated. Making the story public would mean opening my private life to scrutiny, but the chance to stop Brad from hurting anyone else outweighed my reservations. The journalist, a sharp and relentless woman named Kara, was immediately interested. We met in a downtown cafe, where I laid everything out for her, the photos, the recordings, the testimonies from other victims. This is bigger than I thought, Kara said, her pen moving rapidly across her notebook. Brad isn't just a manipulative trainer. He's a predator hiding in plain sight. Her words solidified my resolve. Over the next week, Kara worked closely with Harper and the investigator to verify every detail. She interviewed Rachel and Jessica, capturing their stories with sensitivity and precision. When the article was published, it sent shockwaves through the community. Behind the gym doors, the dark side of a trusted trainer. The headline was bold, and the story that followed was even more damning. Kara detailed Brad's pattern of exploitation, highlighting his charm, manipulation, and the trail of broken lives he'd left behind. Within hours, the article went viral. Social media erupted with outrage. People who had once admired Brad's charisma and success now saw him for what he truly was. Former clients came forward with their own stories, adding fuel to the fire. Brad's reputation was in tatters, and the gym where he worked swiftly announced his termination. Despite the public backlash, Brad wasn't going down quietly. He issued a statement on his personal social media account, claiming the article was a smear campaign orchestrated by bitter individuals with an agenda. It was a weak defense, but it only inflamed the outrage. As I scrolled through the comments on the article, I felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. The justice I'd been fighting for was finally within reach, but the intensity of the public reaction was overwhelming. "Are you okay?" Harper asked during one of our calls. "I think so," I replied. "It's just a lot to process." "You've done the right thing," he said firmly. Brad's reckoning was long overdue. Meanwhile, Emily reached out again. "Emily, I saw the article. Thank you for doing this. For all of us." I didn't respond. Her gratitude didn't change the past, and I wasn't ready to reopen that door. As the days passed, the fallout from the article grew. Brad's lawyer contacted Harper, threatening legal action, but Harper wasn't concerned. "He doesn't have a leg to stand on," he said confidently. "The evidence is airtight." It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. One evening, Megan called, her voice hesitant. "Emily wants to see you," she said. I sighed, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "Why?" "She wants to apologize again," Megan said. "And she thinks you might need closure too." Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the walls I'd built firmly in place. But another part, the part that still felt the sting of betrayal, knew Megan was right. "Fine," I said finally. "But this is the last time." Megan arranged for Emily and me to meet at her house again. This time, I was prepared for whatever Emily had to say. The wounds from her betrayal were still fresh, but the distance between us had given me perspective. When I arrived, Emily was waiting on the porch, just like last time. But this time, she looked different, more composed, though the weight of everything she'd done was still etched into her features. "Adam," she said quietly. I nodded. "Let's talk." We sat in Megan's living room, the same place where we'd had our first conversation after the vacation. The air was heavy, but I was determined to keep my composure. "I know this won't fix anything," Emily began, her voice steady but soft. "But I need you to understand how sorry I am." I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "I made a terrible mistake," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But what I regret the most is hurting you. You didn't deserve any of this." Her words were sincere, but they didn't soften the ache in my chest. "Why now, Emily?" I asked. "What's the point of this?" She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Because I can't move forward without making things right with you. Even if we can't fix us, I need you to know how much I hate myself for what I did." I leaned back in my chair, her words swirling in my mind. "You didn't just hurt me," I said finally. "You broke my trust. You took everything we built together and threw it away." "I know," she said, her voice cracking. "And I'll never forgive myself for that. But I hope one day you can forgive me." Her tears spilled over, but I didn't reach out to comfort her. "You want my forgiveness?" I said, my tone calm but firm. "Then tell me the truth. Were you ever going to stop? Or would you have kept lying to me if I hadn't found out?" Emily's face crumpled, and she looked down at her hands. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was scared. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I didn't know how to stop. I was selfish, Adam, and I hate myself for it." Her honesty caught me off guard. For weeks, I'd been angry, imagining her as the villain in my story. But now, sitting across from her, I saw a person, flawed, broken, and deeply remorseful. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I appreciate your honesty." Emily nodded, her tears falling freely now. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's all I wanted." The silence that followed was heavy but not unbearable. For the first time, it felt like we'd reached a place of understanding, even if it wasn't reconciliation. "I need to move on," I said, breaking the quiet. "I need to figure out who I am without you." "I understand," Emily replied, "and I'll respect whatever you need." As I stood to leave, she reached for my hand. "Adam," she said, her voice trembling, "I'll always love you. I hope you know that." I looked at her, my emotions a storm of anger, sadness, and something resembling closure. "Take care of yourself, Emily," I said. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving her behind for good. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the echoes of our conversation replaying in my mind. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of peace. Emily's apology didn't erase what she'd done, but it gave me the closure I needed to move forward. This was the beginning of a new chapter. The days following my final conversation with Emily felt strange, almost surreal. For so long, my life had been consumed by betrayal, anger, and the fight to expose Brad. Now that the dust was settling, I was left with a question I hadn't been ready to face. What now? The first step was reclaiming my space. The house, once filled with reminders of Emily, now felt emptier but lighter. I spent hours rearranging furniture, repainting walls, and discarding anything that felt tied to the life we'd built together. It wasn't just about redecorating. It was about starting fresh. Harper called with updates about the legal proceedings against Brad. "The restraining order has been approved," he said, "and the authorities are moving forward with the case." "You've done a good thing, Adam." Hearing those words felt like validation, but it also left me with a sense of finality. The fight against Brad had been my focus for so long, and now it was nearly over. "Keep me updated," I said. "Will do," Harper replied. That evening, I decided to reach out to Megan. She'd been a quiet but consistent presence throughout this ordeal, always offering support without overstepping. "Want to grab coffee sometime?" I texted. Her reply came quickly. "Absolutely." "When and where?" We met at a cozy cafe downtown, one we both frequented with Emily in the past. Sitting across from Megan felt different now, less like a reminder of what I'd lost and more like a connection I hadn't fully appreciated before. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her tone genuine. "I'm getting there," I said, trying to figure out what's next. Megan nodded, her eyes softening. "You've been through a lot, Adam. Give yourself some grace." Our conversation flowed easily, shifting from the chaos of recent events to lighter topics. For the first time in weeks, I found myself laughing, the weight on my chest lifting just a little. "You know," Megan said, her smile teasing, "you're not terrible company when you're not brooding." "High praise," I replied, grinning. As we left the cafe, Megan rested her hand lightly on my arm. "You deserve to be happy, Adam," she said. Her words stayed with me as I drove home. Maybe happiness wasn't as far off as I'd thought. The next morning, I woke with a sense of clarity. It was time to focus on myself, not the past, not the betrayal, but the life I wanted to build moving forward. I started running again, something I hadn't done in years. The rhythm of my feet pounding the pavement became a kind of therapy, a way to process everything I'd been through. As the weeks passed, I found myself thinking about Emily less and less. The anger that had once consumed me was replaced by acceptance. She was part of my story, but she no longer defined it. And as for Brad, the legal system was handling him now. I didn't need to dwell on his downfall. It was out of my hands. One evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. My phone buzzed with a message from Harper. "Harper, Brad's case is moving forward. Looks like he'll be facing charges for harassment and fraud." "Well done, Adam." I stared at the screen, a small smile tugging at my lips. Justice was finally being served. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from anger, free from betrayal, free to start over. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, I realized that the life ahead of me wasn't just about moving on. It was about moving forward. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, the chaos of the past faded into the background. My life became quieter and simpler, a routine of work, exercise, and evenings spent reading or catching up with friends. It wasn't exciting, but it was steady. And for the first time in a long time, steady felt good. One day, Harper called with another update. "Brad took a plea deal," he said. He's agreed to pay restitution to his victims and complete mandatory counseling. He'll be barred from working as a trainer or fitness consultant for the foreseeable future. Hearing the news brought a rush of emotions. Relief, closure, and maybe just a hint of satisfaction. That's good, I said finally. It's more than I ever thought we'd get. After the call, I sat with the news, letting it sink in. Brad's downfall wasn't just about me. It was about everyone he'd hurt. Knowing he wouldn't have the chance to manipulate anyone else felt like a victory, not just for me, but for all his victims. I thought about Emily, wondering if she'd heard about Brad's plea deal. Part of me wanted to reach out, to share the news, but I held back. Our chapter was closed, and revisiting it wouldn't change the outcome. Instead, I focused on moving forward. My runs became longer, and my work became more fulfilling. I started reconnecting with old friends, people I'd unintentionally drifted away from during my marriage. One evening, while out for a drink with a group of friends, Megan's name came up. "She's been asking about you," one of them said, grinning. "Oh yeah," I replied, keeping my tone casual. "Yeah," they said. "You should call her. She always liked you, you know." The comment stayed with me long after the conversation ended. Megan had been a constant presence through everything, a source of support when I needed it most. And as much as I tried to deny it, I couldn't ignore the connection we'd built. The next day, I called her. "Want to grab coffee again?" I asked. "Only if you promise not to brood the whole time," she teased. We met at the same cafe as before, but this time, the air between us felt different. Lighter. Megan was as easy to talk to as ever, her laughter infectious. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future where things didn't feel so heavy, where I didn't have to carry the weight of the past. As we said goodbye, Megan hesitated. "You're doing better," she said, her voice soft. "Thanks to you," I replied honestly. Her smile was warm, and for a moment, I wondered if there was something more waiting for us down the line. That night, I sat on the porch again, watching the stars. The anger and sadness that had once consumed me felt like distant memories, replaced by a quiet sense of hope. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again, and that was enough. The morning was calm and bright, the kind of day that felt like a clean slate. For the first time in months, I woke up without the heavy weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I brewed a cup of coffee, stepped onto the porch to watch the sunrise. The world felt different now, lighter, freer. This was my life again, unburdened by lies and manipulation. Later that day, Harper called to give me the final update on Brad's case. "It's officially over," he said. "The court accepted his plea deal. He's paying restitution and will be monitored closely moving forward." "Good," I replied. "It's what he deserves." "You made this happen, Adam," Harper said. "You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for everyone he hurt." His words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I'd been consumed by anger and pain, but hearing that my actions had made a difference brought a sense of pride I hadn't felt in ages. As I hung up, I realized how far I'd come. The anger that once drove me had transformed into something else, purpose. I wasn't the same person who had walked out of that resort, reeling from Emily's betrayal. I was stronger now, more focused, and ready to embrace the future. A few days later, Megan invited me over for dinner. "It's nothing fancy," she said when I arrived. "Just a little pasta and wine." Her home was warm and inviting, filled with the comforting sense of garlic and basil. We laughed and talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. At one point, Megan set her glass down, her expression turning serious. "I need to say something," she began. "I've watched you go through so much these past few months, and I just want you to know how proud I am of you." Her words took me by surprise, but I managed to smile. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the air between us felt charged with something unspoken. We didn't talk about it that night, but as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between us. Megan had been my rock through everything, and now I was starting to see her in a new light. It wasn't just about moving on, it was about moving forward with someone who truly understood me. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to dwell on the past anymore. Emily, Brad, and the pain they caused were behind me now. Life was waiting, and I was ready to embrace it. That evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I sat on the porch with a notebook in hand. I started jotting down plans for the future, things I wanted to achieve, places I wanted to visit, and goals I'd neglected for too long. For the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open, filled with possibility. Megan's name made its way onto the list, not as a goal, but as a hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, the connection we'd built could grow into something more. And if it didn't, that was okay too. Because I'd learned something important through all of this. I didn't need anyone else to define my happiness. Would you forgive someone who betrayed you? Or is trust impossible to rebuild? Let me know your thoughts below.